In this part of our tutorial, we're going to look at functions that return strings and booleans. So we've seen functions that are void, we've seen functions that are void with parameters, we've seen functions that return numbers such as integers or doubles. Now we're going to look at strings and booleans. So we're going to create a string and a boolean return type function, so one of each, and we're going to have the results print out, and then we're going to do a little extra with the string function. So we use a very basic function for the booleans that will basically just convert any boolean value to false, and we're going to use a combine names function for the strings that will just take one string and concatenate it right onto the other. This part of our tutorial will just deal with non-void return types again, but we'll be looking at booleans and strings. So let's just start off with a very simple example. We're going to just create a function, and this function is just going to change a boolean from true to false, or if it's already false, it's just going to leave it at false. So let's have this public, and we're going to have a return a boolean, and let's call this to false, because all it's doing is it's taking in whatever variable we pass to it, and it's changing it to false. So we're going to pass this in a boolean, and we're going to call this, let's just say is true. And why don't we create one up here? So boolean is true equals true. Alright, and this is going to basically change is true to be false, and we're going to return it. Cool. So, necessarily a particularly useful function. It's not doing a whole lot. What it's really doing is changing the value of this boolean to false every time. It's just to demonstrate a boolean return type. So let's go ahead and call it. So we're going to print out the results after we call it. So it's going to be to false. And we're going to pass in the boolean we created up here, called is true. Is true. Okay, and we're going to say boolean result is the result of this, and we'll print it out. So text is result. And we're going to change that to a string. Okay, so just to recap quickly, this is a function that's basically just going to change whatever boolean we give it to false every single time, and it's going to return it. And we're going to store the results in this boolean called result once we call it in our onCreate function here, and we're going to print out the result. So let's go ahead and do that now. We'll just give it a quick run through. And again, this is just demonstrating a boolean return type, just to prove that we can return pretty much any type. Okay, and we get false being printed out, which is good because we started off with is true having the value of true. We passed it to the toFalse function. It changed the value to false and then returned it, stored it in result, and printed that out. Alright, very good. So now we know how to return Boolean type functions, or rather create functions with the Boolean return type. Now let's take a look at strings. So let's create a function that maybe adds two strings together, or what we call concatenates the two. So it basically just takes one string and sticks it right onto the end of the other string. So this one is going to be called, it's going to return a string, and it will be called concatenate. Okay, and that's basically just a fancy word for sticking two strings together. It's going to take in two strings. It's going to take in string A and string B. Okay, and we're going to create a string C, which is basically going to be A plus B, and we'll return it. Cool. So this is basically just taking two strings. It's going to stick them together. So stick string B onto the end of string A, and it's going to store the results in C, and it's going to return it. So this might be useful for maybe you have a bunch of names like first names and last names and you want to stick them together to form one string. So maybe we can take in a first name and a last name. And in fact, why don't we do that? Let's call this something fun. So we'll take in let's call this combine names. And instead of A and B, we're going to say that this is first name and last name. So again, maybe we have a list of names where we have first and last names, and we're just going to combine them into one name. It's going to be first name and last name. Good stuff. Okay. And this is going to be full name. We'll return that. Cool. So if we were to call it in, we no longer want to call this function, so I'm just going to comment it out. And I'm going to place my code just above, so if we call it here, we'll have to create a string again. So we'll call this string full name, and again, local variables, so I can use the same variable name if I want. And we're going to have this be the result of combine names, and why don't we combine the names? So we'll create a couple of strings, we'll combine the names mammoth, and we'll give the space there, so there's a space, interactive. Good stuff. And now we want to print it out. Alright, so this is, again, just to recap, going to combine names, going to take in a first name and a last name, stick them together, or concatenate them as we say, and return it. Going to store the variable in in this variable full name. In this case, we're calling combine names on mammoth and interactive, so it's going to stick these two together, store them in full name, and then we're going to print it out. And we no longer need this toString because it's already a string. Okay, so let's go ahead and call that now. So we'll stop this running, and we'll run with an XSS. And this is just a warning again that this isn't used, which is fine. We don't need to use it. We get mammoth interactive being printed out here, which is exactly what we want to have happen. Again, we are calling combine names, we're passing it in these two. So that's our first name is mammoth, last name is interactive, adding them together, returning it, and storing it in this variable. So when we call a function and store it into a variable, this is just another variable assignment. So we're just basically saying this variable contains the results of this function. So this is pretty much the same thing as saying full name has a value, and there's a semicolon, mammoth interactive. It's exactly the same thing as saying this, except we're having a function that performs a task and then assigns a variable value. Okay, so we can do more than just print out the results. That's all we've been doing so far. So let's do something a little different. We can maybe add another string onto the end of this. So let's say full name now equals full name plus, maybe we're going to add another string onto it. Let's say the string is awesome, and a couple exclamation marks. Okay, so we've now called the function on mammoth and interactive, so it's performed its task of combining them, and it's stored the combined string of mammoth interactive that we see here in our variable full name. We're now going to take that full name variable that has the results of this function, and we're going to add another string onto the end of it. So this is just one thing that you can do with the results of a non-void function. And there we go. So we'll stop that and rerun it. Yeah, this is one of the great things about having a non-void return type function, is that you can store the results in a variable and then manipulate it. You can change the variable value, you can add stuff to it, and basically do what you want, treat it like another variable. And here we go, we get Mammoth Interactive is awesome being printed out, and that's because we again called the function on this, it's combined Mammoth and Interactive, and then we just added another string onto the end of it. So again, this is something you can do with the non-void return type. Just basically the takeaway message is that when we store the results of a function call in a variable, it's basically just another variable assignment, and just treat that like you would any other variable. In this part of our tutorial, we took a look at functions that return strings and booleans. We didn't bother with the characters because I think once you see strings and booleans, you can understand that we can do the same thing with characters too. So we did this by first creating a function that changed any boolean value to false. We called this toFalse. So it's a pretty simple function. And then we made one that combined strings, so basically just added one string onto the end of the other. And then we stored the results in a variable and then added another string onto that and then had them all print out. So by now you should be able to create functions that return strings and booleans and characters too, and manipulate the values that we store the function results in. So again, we're storing these function results in a variable, and that's to be treated like any other variable that can be reassigned or manipulated in some way.